There is a moment that lives between rest and action. It has no fixed length. Sometimes it lasts a second. Sometimes it stretches across minutes or longer still. This is the moment we might call the threshold. It is the space before you begin. You may have felt this space many times. Perhaps you are feeling it now. It has a particular quality to it, this in-between time. It is not quite stillness and not yet movement. It is something else entirely. If you close your eyes for a moment, you might be able to recall the last time you felt it. That moment before you opened your email, before you got up from the couch, before you picked up the phone to make a call you had been putting off. There was a moment before the action, a space, a pause. That was the threshold. It can feel like nothing at all, or it can feel like everything. It can pass so quickly you barely notice it. Or it can expand until it seems to fill the entire room, the entire evening, the entire day. What happens in this space is often misunderstood. We have been taught to see it as a failure of will, as laziness finding its foothold, as weakness making itself known. But this is not what is happening. What is happening is far more intricate and far more ordinary than that. Before any action begins, there is a kind of calculation taking place. It happens mostly outside of your awareness, in systems that have been measuring cost and reward since long before you learned to name them. These systems are asking questions. How much will this require? What might it give back? What is being asked of my body, my attention, my reserves? This is not overthinking. This is not hesitation born of character flaw. This is your nervous system doing what it has always done, weighing the world, preparing for movement, making its assessments in the background of your experience. You might not feel this as calculation. You might feel it as resistance, as heaviness, as a vague sense that you do not want to do what you know you are about to do. But beneath that feeling, beneath that resistance, there is process. There is machinery. There is evaluation happening at levels you cannot quite see. And alongside this calculation, something else unfolds. There is feeling. There is emotion in this space. Sometimes anxiety. Sometimes a kind of heaviness that seems to press down on your chest, making the simple feel complicated, making the small feel large. Sometimes it is not heavy at all. Sometimes it is just a kind of blankness, a flatness, an absence of energy or interest. Sometimes it is sharp and clear, a specific fear, a specific dread. Sometimes it is so diffuse you cannot name it, cannot point to it, can only feel it as a general reluctance, a general pulling back. You might notice that even a task you know to be brief can feel enormous before you begin it. A task that might take 5 minutes can feel, in this threshold moment, like it will consume your entire evening. A simple email can feel like a mountain. A short walk can feel like a journey. This is not a distortion of your perception. This is your mind attempting to predict what lies ahead, and predictions made from outside an experience are never quite accurate. The threshold state is unstable by nature. It does not resolve through waiting. It does not clear through thinking about it longer. It persists until something shifts, until you move, or until the moment passes entirely and you remain where you are. And then it happens again. The next time you face a task, a decision, a movement from one state to another, the threshold returns. It is always returning. It is part of the architecture of action, part of the structure of how your mind moves through the world. Let us stay here a moment longer, in this space before beginning. There is something important to notice about how different this moment feels from what comes after. Many people report that starting feels harder than continuing, much harder in some cases. You may have experienced this yourself. The resistance before opening the document, before making the phone call, before getting up from where you are sitting. It can feel overwhelming. And then, once you have begun, once you are inside the task itself, the resistance often fades. Not always completely, but noticeably. Enough to surprise you. This tells us something. It tells us that initiation and continuation are not the same process. They do not draw from the same well. The energy required to start is different from the energy required to keep going. It is not simply more of the same. It is a different kind of energy altogether. Perhaps you have noticed this in your own experience. Perhaps there have been days when you sat at your desk for an hour, not working, not quite resting, just sitting in the space before starting. And then something shifted. You cannot quite say what, and you began. And once you began, the work flowed. Not easily, perhaps, but steadily. The resistance that held you before starting seemed to evaporate once you were underway. Or perhaps you have experienced the opposite. Perhaps you have started easily and then found the work itself difficult. Found continuation harder than initiation. This happens too, but less often. More commonly, the threshold is where the friction lives. The threshold is where you get stuck. Why might this be? What makes the first step distinct from the second, from the 10th, from the 100th? Before you start, the task exists only as an idea, as a projection into the future. Your mind is not yet inside the experience. It is trying to imagine the experience, trying to estimate what it will feel like, how long it will take, what difficulties it might contain. And these estimates tend to lean heavy. They tend to inflate the cost. Think about the last time you cleaned your kitchen, or organized a drawer, or responded to a backlog of messages. Before you started, it probably felt like it would take much longer than it actually did. The projection was inflated. The estimate was wrong. But you could not know it was wrong until after you had started, until after you were inside the task and could measure it directly. This happens because your evaluating systems are operating with incomplete information. They are trying to predict something they have not yet experienced. And in the absence of direct experience, they default to caution. They overestimate cost. They underestimate your capacity. They lean toward the protection rather than risk. There is something the research calls effort discounting. The further away a reward feels, the less valuable it seems to your evaluating systems. And before you start, everything about the task is in the future. The satisfaction of completion, the relief of having done it, the benefit it might bring. All of it sits on the other side of this threshold you have not yet crossed. Meanwhile, what you are experiencing right now is immediate. The comfort of not moving, the ease of staying as you are, the known quality of this present moment, however imperfect it might be. Even if this present moment is not particularly pleasant, even if you are uncomfortable, restless, guilty about not starting, there is still a kind of familiarity to it. You know this state. You have been in this state before. It is predictable, and predictability has value. even when what is being predicted is discomfort. The future, by contrast, is unknown. The task ahead is uncertain. You do not know exactly how it will feel, what obstacles you will encounter, whether you will succeed or struggle, and uncertainty has cost. It adds weight to the threshold, makes the transition feel riskier than it might actually be. And so the balance tips. The cost feels heavier than it is. The reward feels lighter than it will be. And you remain in the threshold, caught between the two. This is not a failure of your character. This is a feature of how anticipation works, how your mind prices action before action has begun. The system is not broken. It is doing what it was built to do. It simply does not have complete information yet. It cannot have complete information. Not until you cross over. Not until you start. There is another layer to consider. Something about the way your mind organizes itself around tasks, around goals, around the coordination of thought and action. To start something requires more than motivation. It requires more than desire, more than intention, more than the simple wish to do a thing. It requires what might be called executive function. This is the part of your cognitive system that manages sequences, that holds instructions in mind, that switches your attention from one thing to another, that inhibits the pull of distraction. You use executive function constantly, throughout your day, often without noticing. When you remember what you were about to do after you have been interrupted. When you hold a phone number in your mind long enough to dial it. When you resist the urge to check your phone while someone is talking to you. When you switch from one project to another. All of this draws on executive function. And starting, moving from not doing to doing, places a particular demand on these systems. Before you begin a task, your mind is not yet configured for it. Your attention is elsewhere. Your working memory holds other information. Your habits of the moment are oriented toward whatever you have been doing, or not doing, in the moments before now. Perhaps you have been reading, or scrolling, or staring out the window, or having a conversation. Whatever you have been doing, there is a cognitive configuration active in your mind. A pattern of attention, a set of mental representations, a particular mode of processing. This configuration is stable. It wants to continue. It has momentum. To start means to reconfigure, to shift the pattern, to change which neural networks are active and which are resting, which goals are prioritized and which are set aside. This is not a metaphor. This is something that happens in the structure of your brain, in the firing patterns of your neurons, in the chemistry of your attention. And this reconfiguration takes something from you. It has a cost. Not always a large cost, but a real one. A kind of friction. You might think of it as mental inertia. Not inertia in the sense of laziness, but inertia in the sense of physics. A body at rest tends to stay at rest. A body in motion tends to stay in motion. Not because the body lacks motivation, but because change itself requires energy. Because transitioning from one state to another has an inherent cost, built into the physics of the system. Your mind operates similarly. A mind in one state tends to remain in that state. To change states requires energy, requires a push, requires something to overcome the friction of the transition. The threshold, then, is partly this: the moment where your cognitive systems are preparing to reconfigure, where the friction of transition is at its highest, where the state change has not yet completed, but is being asked to begin. You may notice that your mind feels especially sticky at the threshold. Thoughts wander more easily. Distractions seem more compelling. Small decisions feel harder than they should. A question like, "Which document should I open first?" can suddenly feel impossibly complex. You might find yourself checking your phone, or getting a glass of water, or adjusting your chair, or doing anything other than starting the task you sat down to do. This is not procrastination in the moral sense. This is not you being bad, or wrong, or weak. This is the executive system under load, the machinery of self-regulation straining slightly under the demand of switching, of starting, of moving from one configuration to another. And here is something important. This friction exists regardless of how simple the task is. Even tasks that require almost no effort once you are doing them can have significant initiation friction. Because the friction is not about the task itself. It is about the transition. It is about the shift. You could be starting something you enjoy, something you are good at, something you want to do. And there can still be friction at the threshold. Still that moment of resistance, that heaviness, that sense that starting requires something from you that continuing does not. This is why you can sit down to do something pleasurable, to read a book you love, to play a game you enjoy, to work on a project that excites you, and still feel that moment of hesitation before you begin. The hesitation is not about whether you want to do the thing. It is about the state change itself. It is about the transition. When you shift from one task to another, there are costs that accumulate. These costs are sometimes called transition costs or switching costs, and they live primarily at the beginning of the new task, not distributed evenly across it. Think about a time when you were deeply engaged in something, a conversation, a book, a problem you were solving, and then you had to stop and switch to something else. Perhaps your phone rang, or someone walked into the room, or you remembered something urgent. The interruption itself was jarring. But even after the interruption passed, even after you returned to what you were doing, there was a moment of difficulty. A moment where you had to find your place again, remember where you were, reconstruct the mental state you had been in. That moment was a switching cost, and it happened at the transition, at the boundary between one task and the next. Part of what makes starting effortful is that you must disengage from what you were just doing. Even if what you were just doing was resting, or scrolling, or staring into space, there is a task set active in your mind. A configuration. A pattern of attention and inhibition and goal tracking. Resting has a task set. Not doing has a configuration. It is not the absence of mental activity. It is a particular kind of mental activity with its own patterns, its own defaults, its own momentum. To start something new, you must first deactivate this pattern. You must release it, step away from it, create space for something else. This is not always easy. The previous state has momentum. It has inertia. It wants to continue. You might notice this as a kind of mental stickiness. Your attention keeps drifting back to what you were just thinking about, what you were just doing, what you were just looking at. Even after you have decided to start the new task, even after you have opened the document or picked up the tool, your mind is still partly engaged with the previous state. This is disengagement lag. It is part of the switching cost, and it adds to the friction at the threshold. And then, once you have disengaged, you must retrieve the instructions for the new task. You must remember what you are about to do, why you are doing it, what the first step is, what the goal looks like. You must assemble these pieces in working memory. Hold them steady long enough to begin acting on them. If the task is familiar, this retrieval might be quick and automatic. If the task is new or complex, this retrieval might take longer, might require more effort, might feel like you are fumbling around in the dark trying to find the light switch. Either way, there is work happening here. Cognitive work, the kind that uses resources, that draws on your executive systems, that contributes to the sense of effort at the threshold. And you must also inhibit interference from the previous task. You must prevent the old pattern from reasserting itself, from pulling your attention back to where it just was. This inhibition is active. It is not passive. It requires effort. It is part of what makes the threshold feel heavy. Imagine you have been scrolling through social media, and now you are trying to start writing. Your mind keeps wanting to return to the scrolling. Images, headlines, fragments of posts keep intruding into your awareness. You have to actively push them away, actively maintain your focus on the writing task. This is inhibition. This is interference suppression. And it costs something. All of this happens very quickly, often outside of your conscious awareness, but it happens nonetheless. And it has a cost. A metabolic cost, a cognitive cost, an experiential cost that you feel as resistance, as friction, as the weight of starting. Certain parts of your brain are especially active during this transition. Areas that coordinate shifts in priority. Areas that suppress competing patterns. Areas that hold new instructions steady while you begin to follow them. These areas are working hard at the threshold, even if the task itself will not require much from them once you are underway. If you could watch your brain during this transition, you would see increased activity in regions like the anterior cingulate cortex, which helps coordinate control and detect when goals need to be reprioritized. You would see activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which helps suppress interference and maintain focus. These areas are part of the control network, and they are especially engaged at boundaries, at transitions, at moments of switching. And here is something that cannot be solved by planning ahead. Some of these costs do not resolve until you engage with the task itself, until you are looking at the page, holding the tool, speaking the first word. The transition must happen in real time. It must happen at the threshold. There is no way to complete it in advance. You can prepare, you can plan. You can reduce some of the switching cost by getting ready, by gathering your materials, by clarifying your intention. But you cannot eliminate the cost entirely. The final step of the transition must be taken at the boundary itself. This is why, even when you are well prepared, even when you know exactly what you need to do, there can still be friction at the moment of starting. Because some of the friction is structural. It is built into the process of transitioning. It cannot be avoided, only recognized, only moved through. Let us turn now to emotion, to feeling, to the way that affect colors this threshold space. You may have noticed that fear sometimes lives in the moment before beginning. Not always the large, obvious fear of danger or harm. Sometimes it is quieter than that. A fear of difficulty, a fear of frustration, a fear that you will not do the task well enough, quickly enough, easily enough. This fear is often specific to the threshold. Once you start, once you are inside the task, the fear often subsides. But before you start, it can loom large. It can fill the space, making the threshold feel longer and heavier than it needs to be. Why does fear concentrate here, in this particular moment? Partly, it is because the threshold is a moment of exposure. Before you start, the possibility still exists that you will do well, that the task will be easy, that everything will go smoothly. Once you start, that possibility begins to collapse into reality. And reality is always more complex, more uncertain, more revealing than possibility. Perfectionism often intensifies at the threshold. Before you begin, the possibility still exists that you might do this perfectly. The blank page is perfect. The unstarted project is perfect. It exists only as potential, unmarred by actual performance, by actual effort, by actual limitation. Once you begin, that perfection starts to slip away. You make choices, and not all of them are the best choices. You make mistakes, small ones, barely noticeable, but mistakes nonetheless. The work becomes real, becomes actual, becomes something that can be evaluated, judged, measured against an ideal. And so there can be a reluctance to start, a desire to preserve the potential, to stay in the space where perfection is still theoretically available. Starting means giving up that perfect possibility in exchange for an imperfect reality. And that exchange can feel like a loss. You might notice this in yourself. A hesitation that is not about effort, not about energy, but about quality. A sense that as long as you have not started, you cannot fail. As long as you have not started, the task remains protected from your limitations. But of course, this is an illusion. The task does not get done while it remains perfect and unstarted. The potential is valueless if it never actualizes. But the illusion can be compelling nonetheless, especially at the threshold, especially in that moment before you commit. There's also something about evaluation that sharpens here. Before you begin, you are not yet being measured. Not by others, not by yourself. But once you start, you are. The task becomes a test, even if no one is watching, even if nothing hangs on the outcome. Your performance becomes visible, and visibility can feel like pressure. This is especially true if the task is one where you expect to be judged, where others will see what you have done, where your competence is on display. Writing, presenting, creating, performing. These tasks often carry evaluation weight, and that weight concentrates at the threshold. Before you start writing, no one can see whether you are a good writer or a bad writer. Once you start, the words appear and they reveal something about you, about your thinking, about your ability. That revelation can feel risky. It can create anxiety. It can make the threshold feel like a cliff edge rather than a doorway. For some people, this is where anxiety concentrates, not during the task, but before it, in the anticipation, in the imagining of difficulty, of judgment, of failure. The task has not yet begun, and yet the emotional weight of it is already present, already pressing. You might feel this as tightness in your chest, or quickness in your breathing, or restlessness in your body. You might feel it as racing thoughts, or spiraling worries, or sense of being overwhelmed before you have even started. This is anticipatory anxiety. It lives in the threshold. And sometimes the opposite is also true. Sometimes what you feel at the threshold is not anxiety, but a kind of flatness, a boredom, an absence of interest or energy or desire. The task ahead seems dull. It seems to promise no reward, no satisfaction, no engagement. Just effort for the sake of effort, obligation for the sake of obligation. Boredom at the threshold is different from boredom during a task. During a task, boredom means the task itself is unstimulating. But boredom at the threshold is more like a prediction. It is your mind anticipating low reward, anticipating that the task will not be worth the effort, anticipating that you will not enjoy it. And this prediction can be wrong. Often it is wrong. Often tasks that seem boring before you start become more engaging once you are underway. But the prediction still affects your willingness to start. If you expect to be bored, if you expect the task to be unrewarding, the threshold becomes harder to cross. This combination, boredom and pressure together, can be especially paralyzing. The task feels both uninteresting and demanding. There is nothing to pull you forward and much to push you back. The threshold stretches. Time slows. You remain where you are. You might feel this as a kind of internal paralysis. You want to start in some abstract sense. You know you should start, but you cannot quite bring yourself to move. Something is holding you back. Not fear exactly. Not laziness exactly. Something more diffuse. A kind of reluctance that has no clear name. What is important to understand is that these emotions are not accurate predictors. How you feel before you start is not how you will feel once you are started. The threshold state is not representative of the task itself. It is its own thing, its own experience, and it often bears little resemblance to what comes after. You might feel bored before you start, and then find flow once you are engaged. You might feel anxious before you start, and then find calm once you are moving. You might feel overwhelmed before you start, and then find the task more manageable than you expected. The threshold lies to you, in a sense. It shows you a distorted preview. It amplifies the negative, minimizes the positive, inflates the cost, deflates the reward. And if you mistake that preview for the truth, you will hesitate longer than you need to. But the threshold is not trying to deceive you. It is trying to protect you. It is trying to ensure you do not start something you cannot finish. Do not commit to something you cannot afford. It is erring on the side of caution. It is being conservative with your resources. The problem is that its estimates are often too conservative. Its caution is often excessive. And so you end up held back by protection that is no longer serving you. This space between rest and action has a name. Some call it liminal. Liminal means threshold, means in between, means neither one thing nor another. The word comes from the Latin limen, which means threshold, doorway, entrance. It describes spaces that are transitional, spaces that you pass through rather than inhabit. A hallway is liminal. A waiting room is liminal. The moment between sleeping and waking is liminal. And the moment before starting, this, too, is liminal. When you are in this liminal space, you are not resting. Your mind is not at ease. You are not settled. There is a tension in you, a readiness that has not yet found release, an intention that has not yet become action. But you are also not engaged. You are not inside the task, not moving through it, not absorbed by it. You are hovering, suspended, caught between states. This state is uncomfortable by its nature. It is not designed for comfort. It is designed to be temporary. It is the space you pass through on the way to somewhere else. But sometimes it stretches. Sometimes it holds you longer than it should. And then it begins to feel indefinite, as though it might last forever, as though you might remain suspended here without resolution. You might notice that when you are stuck at the threshold, time behaves strangely. Minutes can feel like hours. The clock seems to slow. You check the time, and only a few minutes have passed, though it felt like much longer. This is partly because liminal states create a kind of temporal distortion. When you are not engaged in anything, when you are waiting for something to begin, your attention is not anchored. It drifts. And unanchored attention experiences time differently. Time expands, becomes elastic, loses its usual rhythm. And partly it is because you are aware of the task ahead, aware of what you are not yet doing, and this awareness creates a kind of pressure. The task is waiting. You are waiting, and the waiting itself becomes uncomfortable, becomes something you want to escape from, but cannot quite figure out how. Time behaves strangely at the threshold in another way, too. A task that will take 5 minutes feels like it might take an hour. The end point seems distant, unreachable, obscured. You cannot quite see the shape of the thing you are about to do. You can only sense its weight. This is partly because the task has not yet taken concrete form. It is still abstract, still general, still a cloud of possibilities rather than a sequence of actions. And the abstract always feels heavier than the concrete. Work on my book feels enormous. Edit one paragraph feels manageable. But at the threshold, you are holding the abstract version. The concrete has not yet arrived. You might think of the threshold as holding the entire task at once, collapsed into a single moment. All of it present, all of it pressing, even though you will only ever experience it one moment at a time, one action at a time, one step at a time. This collapsed time creates a sense of being overwhelmed. The task feels too big because you are trying to hold all of it in your awareness simultaneously. But once you start, once you step into the task, time unfolds naturally again. You do one thing, then the next thing, then the next. The task is no longer collapsed. It is sequential, and sequential is manageable. There is also uncertainty at the threshold. You do not yet know how the task will go. You do not know if it will be easy or hard, quick or slow, satisfying or frustrating. This uncertainty inflates the perceived cost. When you do not know what you are walking into, you prepare for the worst-case version. You brace yourself, and bracing is tiring. Once you start, uncertainty begins to resolve. You discover what the task actually requires. You adjust your expectations to match reality. And usually, though not always, reality is more manageable than the worst-case version you were bracing for. The liminal state is short-lived, almost always. Even when it feels endless, it is not. It lasts seconds or minutes, rarely longer. But it is intense while it lasts. It concentrates all the resistance, all the friction, all the weight of transition into a narrow window of experience. And then, if you start, it dissolves. The weight lifts. The abstraction becomes concrete. The uncertainty begins to resolve. And if you do not start, the liminal state eventually fades as well, but in a different way. The moment passes. The opportunity closes. You move back into rest, or into distraction, or into guilt. The threshold releases you, but without resolution, without the shift you were preparing for. And then later, when you face the task again, the threshold returns. The liminal state reappears, because it is not something you pass through once. It is something you encounter again and again, every time you approach a beginning, every time you face a transition. But each encounter is its own moment. Each threshold is its own experience, and each one will pass one way or another, either into action, or into release, or into postponement. But it will not hold you forever. There is something worth considering about mood, about feeling, about the relationship between how you feel and what you do. We often believe that mood should come first, that we should wait until we feel motivated, energized, ready, that these feelings are prerequisites for action, that without them, action is forced, unnatural, unsustainable. This belief is deeply ingrained. You have probably heard it expressed in many forms. Follow your passion. Do what feels right. Listen to your body. Wait until you feel inspired. All of these suggestions assume that feeling precedes action, that mood is the gate that opens to allow behavior through. But this is not quite how it works. Mood does not reliably precede action. Often it follows it. Often engagement and affect improve after initiation, not before. You may have experienced this. You did not want to start. You felt flat or anxious or resistant. The threshold felt heavy. The task felt unappealing. But you started anyway, for whatever reason. Discipline, necessity, accident, momentum. And within a few minutes, something shifted. Your mood caught up to your behavior. The task became easier than you expected. The resistance faded. You found yourself engaged, or at least neutral rather than resistant. The feelings you were waiting for arrived, but only after you had already begun. This is not universal. Sometimes tasks remain difficult all the way through. Sometimes your mood does not improve. Sometimes the resistance you feel at the threshold stays with you during the task, or even intensifies. This happens. It is real. It is part of the range of human experience. But it happens less often than the other pattern. More commonly, the threshold overstates the difficulty. More commonly, your mood improves once you are underway. More commonly, the feelings that were absent at the threshold arrive shortly after you cross it. Why might this be? There are systems in your brain that respond to engagement itself, to movement, to focus, to progress. These systems stabilize affect, generate satisfaction, reduce anxiety. But they do not activate until you are already engaged. They cannot activate from the outside. They need the task to be underway. One of these systems involves dopamine, the neurotransmitter often associated with reward and motivation. Dopamine responds not just to rewards themselves, but to progress toward rewards, to action directed toward goals, to the sense that you are moving in the right direction. At the threshold, before you have started, there is no progress yet. There is no movement toward the goal. And so dopamine is not yet flowing in the way it will once you are engaged. You do not feel motivated because motivation is partly a product of doing, not just a cause of doing. Once you start, once you take the first action, the system begins to respond. Dopamine increases. Motivation builds. the task becomes self-reinforcing. Not always, not completely, but enough to make continuation easier than initiation. There's also something about attention and affect. When you are not engaged in anything, your attention tends to wander inward, toward your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own discomforts. You become more aware of how you feel, and often how you feel at rest is not particularly positive. Restlessness, boredom, mild anxiety, vague dissatisfaction. These are common baseline states when attention has nothing external to anchor to. Once you engage in a task, your attention shifts outward. You are now focused on the task, on the problem, on the work itself. Your feelings do not disappear, but they move to the background. They become less salient, less consuming. And often, just by being less salient, they become less negative. You might notice this shift in your own experience. How much more aware you are of discomfort when you are not doing anything, and how much less aware you are of it when you are absorbed in something. The discomfort might not have changed, but your relationship to it has changed. It is no longer the center of your experience. And so, if you wait for the right mood, you may wait a long time. The mood you are waiting for might only arrive after you have already started, after the threshold has been crossed, after the liminal space has dissolved behind you. Habit helps here. When initiation becomes habitual, when it is transferred to cues, to context, to routine, it becomes less dependent on mood. You start because it is time to start, because the cue has appeared, because the pattern has been triggered. Mood is still present, but it is no longer governing. It is allowed to catch up, rather than leading the way. This is not about forcing yourself. This is not about overriding your feelings through sheer willpower. This is about understanding that feelings are not always accurate guides at the threshold. They are part of the threshold experience, part of the liminal state, but they do not reflect the task itself. They reflect the transition, and transitions are temporary. You might think of it this way. The threshold is a moment of emotional compression. All the resistance, all the reluctance, all the discomfort of not doing concentrates into that moment before starting. And then, once you cross it, that compression releases. The emotions disperse. They do not disappear, but they spread out. They become less intense, less overwhelming. And what you are left with is the task itself, which is usually, though not always, more manageable than the threshold suggested. Let us consider now the way that tasks differ not just in their content, but in their structure, in their level of abstraction. Some tasks are concrete, specific, particular. Answer this email. Wash this dish. Walk to the corner. The action is clear. The steps are visible. The goal is immediate and tangible. When you think about answering a specific email, you know what that means. You can see the email in your mind. You can imagine opening it, reading it, typing a response. The task is located in space and time. It has boundaries. It has a clear end point. Other tasks are abstract, general, open-ended. Work on my career. Improve my health. Make progress on my project. These are not single actions. They are categories, containers, umbrellas beneath which many possible actions might fall. They are higher-level goals that must be translated into lower-level actions before anything can actually happen. When you think about working on your career, you are not thinking about a specific action. You are thinking about an idea, a direction, of value. The task is not located anywhere in particular. It does not have clear boundaries. It does not have an obvious end point. The threshold feels different for these two kinds of tasks. Concrete tasks have lower initiation friction. The transition cost is smaller because the reconfiguration required is smaller. You are shifting from one specific state to another specific state. The path is clear. The first step is obvious. You do not have to decide what doing the task means. You already know. Abstract tasks have higher initiation friction. Before you can start, you must first decide what working on your project means today, in this moment, at this desk. You must select from among the many possible actions that could count as progress. You must translate the abstract into the concrete. And this translation is itself a form of work, a form of cognitive effort, a form of threshold friction. You might notice this in your own experience. How much easier it is to start a task when you know exactly what the task is, and how much harder it is to start when the task is vague, when it is a general intention rather than a specific action. I should exercise. This is abstract. It creates threshold friction. You must decide what kind of exercise, for how long, at what intensity, in what location. Each of these decisions adds friction. Each one is a small obstacle at the threshold. I will do 10 push-ups. This is concrete. It requires no translation. You know what to do. The threshold is narrow. The friction is low. There are control hierarchies in your brain. Different levels of goal representation, from the very abstract down to the very concrete, from the multi-year intention down to the single muscle movement. At the top of the hierarchy, you have broad values and life goals. Be a good parent. Contribute to society. Live authentically. These are the highest level of abstraction. They do not directly produce action. They orient your choices, but they must be translated many times before they reach behavior. Below that, you have medium-term goals and projects. Write a book. Get in shape. Learn a new skill. These are more specific than values, but still abstract. They must be broken down into smaller goals, into tasks, into actions. Below that, you have specific tasks and objectives. Write Chapter 3. Go to the gym on Tuesday. Practice scales for 20 minutes. These are concrete enough to guide action, but they still require some planning, some sequencing, some assembly. And at the bottom of the hierarchy, you have specific actions and movements. Type this word. Lift this weight. Press this key. These are fully concrete. They require minimal translation. They map almost directly onto motor commands. Switching at the higher levels of this hierarchy is more costly than switching at the lower levels. It recruits different brain regions, requires more integration, creates more opportunity for interference and conflict. When you think, I should work on my book, you are activating a high-level goal. But you are not yet configured to act. You must climb down the hierarchy. You must find the rung where action lives. And this descent takes time, takes effort, takes something from you. Work on my book becomes write Chapter 3, becomes revise the opening paragraph, becomes change this sentence, becomes delete this word, and type a new one. Each step down the hierarchy makes the action more concrete, more specific, more immediately actionable. But each step also requires a decision, a choice, a narrowing of possibilities. And all of this happens at the threshold. all of this is part of the initiation cost. By the time you are typing words, the threshold has been crossed. But to get there, you had to navigate the hierarchy, had to translate the abstract into the concrete, had to make choices at every level. This is one reason why vague goals create more hesitation than specific ones. Not because they are less important, but because they require more translation, more decision-making, more configuration before the threshold can be crossed. And so, if you find yourself stuck at the threshold of a large, abstract project, it may help to notice that what you are stuck on is not the project itself, but the abstraction. The friction is not in the doing, but in the deciding what doing means today. You can reduce this friction by doing the translation in advance, by breaking the abstract goal into concrete actions before you reach the threshold. But even then, some amount of friction remains. Because the abstract does not fully translate, there is always a gap between the high-level goal and the low-level action. Always some interpretation required. Always some decision to be made at the moment of starting. There is also something about the body in all of this. Something about movement, about physical effort, about the way that your motor system and your cognitive system share resources, share currencies, share the same underlying machinery of cost and reward. When you hesitate to start a task, you are not only hesitating cognitively, you are hesitating physically. Your body is pricing the movement, anticipating the effort, calculating the metabolic cost of shifting from stillness to action. This might sound strange if you are thinking about cognitive work, about writing or planning or problem solving, about tasks that seem to happen entirely in the mind. But even these tasks have physical components. You must move your fingers, adjust your posture, direct your gaze, sustain wakefulness and attention. And your motor system is involved in all of this, is pricing all of this, is contributing to the resistance you feel at the threshold. Your body is always calculating, always measuring its resources, its reserves, its capacity to act. It is asking, can I afford this movement? What will it cost me? What will I have left afterward? These calculations happen mostly outside of awareness. You do not consciously think, this action will require approximately X calories and Y effort. But your motor system is making these assessments nonetheless, in the background, in the autonomic processes that regulate energy and movement. And these assessments affect your willingness to start. If your body senses that resources are low, that reserves are depleted, that the cost of action might be too high, it increases resistance. It makes starting feel harder. It creates friction at the threshold. This is not laziness. This is not your body being uncooperative. This is your body doing its job, protecting you from overextension, ensuring you do not spend more than you have. There is evidence that cognitive effort and physical effort are valued by similar systems, that they trade off against each other, that they compete for the same resources. When you are tired physically, cognitive tasks feel harder. When you are tired cognitively, physical tasks feel harder. The currencies are different, but they are managed by the same bank. Think about a time when you were physically exhausted, after a long day of physical labor, or after a workout, or after hiking for hours. When you tried to focus on something mentally challenging afterward, it was harder than usual. Your mind felt slower, less sharp, less capable. Not because thinking had physically tired you, but because your system was already depleted and it was rationing resources, making everything feel more effortful. The reverse is also true. After a long day of intense mental work, of solving problems, making decisions, focusing attention, physical tasks feel harder. Walking upstairs feels steeper. Carrying groceries feels heavier. Your body is responding to cognitive depletion, conserving energy, making movement feel more costly. And so, part of the starting energy, part of the threshold friction is this: your body and mind together, calculating what it will cost to move, to engage, to reconfigure, to sustain. And if the cost seems high, if the reserves seem low, the resistance increases. The threshold stretches. This is not something you can think your way out of. This is deeper than thought. This is in the systems that regulate energy, that allocate resources, that keep you alive and functioning across time. These systems have their own logic, their own priorities, and they speak in the language of cost and benefit long before your conscious mind enters the conversation. But here is something you might notice. Once you start moving, once you cross the threshold and engage, your body often finds energy it did not advertise beforehand. The reserves were deeper than the initial estimate suggested. The cost was lower than predicted. This is the threshold lying to you again, pricing high to protect you from overcommitment, from expenditure you cannot afford. Often, though, the price was wrong. Often, you can afford it, but you will not know until you start. You cannot know from the outside. The true cost only becomes clear once you are inside the action, once the movement has begun, once the energy is flowing, and then, once you are moving, momentum helps. Physical movement generates its own energy, its own facilitation. It is easier to keep moving than it was to start moving. The motor system responds to its own activity, becomes more efficient, finds a rhythm. You might experience this as a kind of warming up. The first few minutes of a physical task feel harder, more effortful, more awkward, but then something shifts. Your body finds its pattern, its flow, its groove. Movement becomes easier, smoother, more automatic. The same thing happens with cognitive tasks. The first few minutes feel harder. Your thinking is slower, less fluid, less confident. But then, as you engage, as you move through the material, your mind finds its pattern. Ideas begin to flow more easily. Connections appear. The work becomes less effortful. This is not just psychological, this is physiological. Your systems are adjusting, optimizing, finding the most efficient way to do what you are asking them to do. But they cannot adjust until you start. They cannot optimize from the outside. They need the task to be underway. Let us return now to something more practical, something closer to the surface of experience. How do some people seem to start more easily than others? What are they doing differently? Often, they are not relying on deliberation. They are not thinking through the decision each time. They are not weighing cost and benefit consciously, not negotiating with themselves, not waiting for motivation. Instead, they have cues, environmental triggers, habitual patterns, if-then routines. When I sit at this desk, I write. After I make coffee, I check email. When the alarm sounds, I get up. The cue appears and the action follows, with minimal deliberation, minimal threshold friction. This is not about discipline in the traditional sense. This is not about willpower or character strength or moral virtue. This is about control delegation. The decision to start has been made in advance, linked to a context, transferred from the deliberative system to the automatic system. And the automatic system does not experience the threshold the same way. It does not hesitate. It simply executes. Think about the things you do automatically, without thinking, without deciding. Brushing your teeth after you wake up. Making coffee when you enter the kitchen in the morning. Checking your phone when you hear a notification. These actions happen with almost no threshold friction. There is no moment of deliberation, no weighing of options, no internal negotiation. The cue appears, and you act. This is because the decision has been delegated. Your deliberative system is not involved. The behavior is triggered by context, by habit, by associations that have been built up over time. And behaviors that are triggered this way bypass much of the threshold friction that affects deliberate actions. Cues work by simplifying the transition, by reducing the number of decisions required, by providing a clear signal that cuts through ambiguity and uncertainty. The liminal space shrinks. The threshold becomes a narrow doorway rather than a long hallway. You can build these cues intentionally. You can create associations between contexts and actions, between triggers and behaviors. This is sometimes called habit formation. But it is really about control delegation, about transferring the initiation decision from your conscious deliberative system to your automatic contextual system. It takes time to build these associations. Weeks, usually. Sometimes months. The cue must be consistent. The action must be consistent. The pairing must be repeated until the association is strong enough to operate automatically. But once the association is built, starting becomes easier. Not effortless, perhaps, but easier. The threshold friction is reduced. The liminal space is shorter. You spend less time stuck in the in-between. There are also micro-actions. Small, easy behaviors that serve as entry points to larger tasks. Opening the document. Picking up the tool. Standing up from the chair. These actions are low cost, high probability. They do not feel like starting. They feel like preparation, like adjustment, like nothing at all. But once they are completed, you are closer to the task than you were. You are inside the action sequence now, even if barely. And the next step is easier than the first. And the step after that is easier still. This is momentum. Not the momentum of motivation, but the momentum of behavior itself, of action begetting action. You might think of micro-actions as a way to trick yourself past the threshold. Not by ignoring it, not by forcing through it, but by making it so small that it barely registers. Instead of thinking, I need to write this report, you think, I will just open the document. That is all. Just open it. No commitment beyond that. And then, once the document is open, the next step becomes obvious. Maybe you read what you wrote last time. Maybe you fix a typo. Maybe you write a sentence. Each of these is small, easy, low friction. None of them feels like working on the report. But cumulatively, they add up. They move you forward. They get you across the threshold without you quite realizing you have crossed it. This works because each small action lowers the friction for the next action. Each step makes the next step more likely, more accessible, more automatic. This is behavioral momentum. It is a real phenomenon, measurable, predictable. Actions tend to continue once they have started. Stillness tends to continue until something disrupts it. The threshold is where the disruption happens, and micro-actions make that disruption gentler, easier, less confrontational. These mechanisms do not eliminate the threshold, but they modulate it. They make it passable. They reduce the cognitive load, the emotional weight, the executive demand. They turn starting from a conscious event into something that happens almost by accident, almost by design. You might notice that when you use these approaches, you feel less internal conflict. There is less negotiation, less debate, less back and forth. The decision is simpler. Often, it does not feel like a decision at all. It feels like you are just doing what comes next, following the cue, taking the small step. And suddenly, without quite meaning to, you have started. The threshold is behind you. The task is underway. And it feels, if not easy, at least possible. At least manageable. At least less overwhelming than it did from the other side. There is a particular kind of cue-based initiation that deserves its own attention. It is sometimes called an implementation intention. It takes the form, if X, then Y. If it is 8 a.m., then I write. If I finish eating, then I clean the kitchen. If I feel anxious, then I take 3 slow breaths. These are pre-compiled start scripts. You are deciding in advance, outside the threshold, what you will do when a particular condition is met. And then, when that condition arrives, the decision is already made. You do not have to rebuild it. You do not have to recalculate. You simply execute. The beauty of this approach is that it removes decision-making from the threshold. At the moment of starting, you are not deciding whether to start. You are simply recognizing that the condition has been met and following through on the commitment you made earlier. This is important because decision-making at the threshold is often compromised. Your deliberative capacity is already loaded. Your mood may be poor, your motivation may be low, your resistance may be high. These are not ideal conditions for making good decisions. And yet, this is when we often try to decide whether to start. Implementation intentions move the decision to a better time, to a moment when you are not yet in the threshold, not yet feeling the weight of starting, not yet experiencing the liminal state. You decide when you are clear-headed, when you are committed, when you can think about your goals without the immediate pressure of action. And then, when the threshold arrives, you do not decide. You remember. You recognize. You follow through. Research suggests that these intentions change how your brain processes the initiation cue. The if becomes more salient. You notice it more quickly, more reliably. Your attention is primed to detect the condition. And when the condition appears, your response is faster, more automatic, less effortful. The then also becomes more automatic. It requires less top-down control, less deliberation, less executive effort. The action flows more directly from the cue. The gap between recognizing the condition and starting the behavior shrinks. In a sense, you are shrinking the liminal window. You are compressing the threshold so that less time is spent in the uncomfortable, conflicted, in-between state. The cue appears, the action begins, and the threshold dissolves almost immediately. This is not about becoming robotic. This is not about eliminating choice or agency. You are still choosing. You chose when you made the implementation intention. You chose to structure your future behavior in this way. The execution is automatic, but the decision behind it was yours, and you can always override it. If the condition arrives and you genuinely cannot follow through, if something more urgent has come up, if your circumstances have changed, you can choose not to execute. The implementation intention is a guide, not a prison. But most of the time, if you have set up the intention well, you will follow through. Not because you have to, but because the path of least resistance has shifted. It is now easier to follow the intention than to deliberate about whether to follow it. The decision has been made, the commitment is clear, and all you have to do is act. This is about recognizing that some decisions benefit from being made once rather than repeatedly. That the threshold is not where your best thinking happens. That deliberation at the moment of starting is often counterproductive, often just another form of resistance, another way to remain suspended in the liminal state. By deciding in advance, you free yourself from the negotiation. You honor the fact that your pre-threshold self, the self that is not yet tired, not yet conflicted, not yet overwhelmed by the weight of starting, might be better positioned to make this choice than your threshold self. And then, when the moment arrives, you trust that decision. You follow the script. You let the cue carry you across the boundary, into the task, out of the in-between. There is also something happening beneath the surface of your awareness, something that begins before you consciously decide to start. Your brain is preparing to act before you know you are preparing. Systems are aligning. Resources are being allocated. Attention is beginning to shift. This is unconscious executive preparation. It happens in the background, outside of conscious control, outside of conscious awareness. You might think of your consciousness as the tip of an iceberg. What you are aware of, your thoughts, your decisions, your intentions, is only a small part of what your brain is doing. Beneath the surface, vast amounts of processing are happening continuously, silently, shaping your behavior in ways you do not directly perceive. This unconscious processing includes preparation for action. Your brain is constantly monitoring your environment, your goals, your resources. It is detecting opportunities, assessing readiness, configuring systems for possible actions. Most of this happens without you noticing. Studies have shown that subliminal cues you cannot consciously perceive, can still bias your behavior, can still facilitate initiation if those cues are aligned with your goals. Your unconscious is listening for opportunities, watching for the conditions that match your intentions, readying you to move even before you realize you are ready. Imagine you have set a goal to exercise more. You are not consciously thinking about this goal all the time, but it is represented somewhere in your cognitive system, marked as active, as relevant, and your unconscious processes are sensitive to this goal. When you see your running shoes by the door, when you walk past a gym, when you hear someone mention exercise, your unconscious notices. It registers these cues, even if you do not consciously attend to them. And it begins to prepare. It primes the relevant motor programs, activates the relevant representations, adjusts your readiness to act. By the time you consciously think, maybe I should go for a run, your brain has already been preparing for this possibility for seconds, or minutes, or longer. The conscious thought is not the beginning of the process. It is the culmination, the moment when the unconscious preparation crosses the threshold into awareness. This means that subjective readiness, the feeling of being prepared to start, often lags behind actual neural preparation. You feel unready while your brain is already assembling the action sequence. You feel stuck in the threshold, while the threshold is already beginning to dissolve from the inside. This is not always reassuring in the moment. You cannot access this preparation consciously. You cannot feel it happening. You do not know how ready you actually are until you try to start. But it is happening nonetheless. The gap between feeling ready and being ready is often smaller than it seems. And this suggests something important. You do not always need to wait for the feeling of readiness. The feeling is a lagging indicator. By the time you feel ready, you have often been ready for some time. And if you wait for the feeling, you may wait longer than necessary, remaining in the liminal state even after the conditions for starting have already been met. This is not an argument for ignoring your feelings. Your feelings are important. They are informative. They tell you something about your state, your resources, your readiness. But they are not perfectly accurate. They lag. They overshoot. They are conservative. Sometimes the most accurate way to assess your readiness is to try. To take the first small step and see what happens. To test the waters rather than standing on the shore, trying to predict whether you will be able to swim. Often you will find that you are more ready than you felt, that the action is more accessible than the threshold suggested, that the unconscious preparation has done its work, and all that remains is to step forward. Let us consider the timing of initiation more carefully. When exactly does the transition happen? When does the threshold end and the task begin? Some of the preparation for starting can happen in advance, offline, before the moment arrives. You can plan what you will do. You can gather your tools. You can visualize the first step. You can think through the sequence. This is early task set updating. It happens before engagement, and it reduces some of the transition cost. If you know in advance what you will be working on, if you have thought through the steps, if you have gathered your materials, the threshold will be easier to cross when the time comes. The cognitive load is distributed across time rather than concentrated at the moment of starting. But not all of the preparation can happen in advance. Some aspects of initiation are time-locked. They can only resolve at the moment of starting, when you are face to face with the actual task, the actual environment, the actual demands. These are the late conflict resolution processes. The inhibition of competing patterns, the suppression of distraction, the full reconfiguration of attention. You cannot fully inhibit competing patterns until you know what you are inhibiting them in favor of. You cannot fully suppress distraction until you are engaging with the task that requires focus. You cannot fully reconfigure your attention until you are directing it toward something specific. These processes require live input. They require the actual context, the actual task, the actual moment. They cannot be completed in simulation, in planning, in imagination. They must happen in real time. This is why planning ahead helps, but does not eliminate the threshold. It reduces the cost, but it does not remove it. The final step must still be taken in real time, in the moment, at the boundary between not doing and doing. Think about a time when you planned meticulously for a task. You knew exactly what you were going to do, when you were going to do it, how you were going to do it. You had gathered everything you needed. You had thought it through completely. And yet, when the moment came to actually start, there was still a moment of friction, still a threshold to cross, still a sense of resistance, even if smaller than it might have been without the planning. That residual friction is the time-locked cost. It is the part of the transition that can only happen at the transition, and it is unavoidable. And this means that some amount of resistance at the threshold is structural, not personal. Not because you are doing something wrong, not because you lack discipline or motivation, but because the transition itself has intrinsic costs that can only be paid at the transition. You might notice this as a small but persistent friction, even when you have prepared well, even when you are committed, even when you know exactly what to do. That friction is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that your brain is completing the final phase of the transition, the phase that cannot be completed until you are here, now, starting. There is something almost comforting in recognizing this. It means that the friction is not your fault. It is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It is built into the process. Everyone experiences it. Everyone must cross the threshold. Everyone must pay the transition cost. And knowing this might ease the pressure slightly. Knowing that the friction is structural, not personal. Knowing that it will pass, that it always passes, once the threshold has been fully crossed. Knowing that you are not alone in experiencing this, that this is simply how starting works, how transitions work, how the machinery of action operates. The threshold is real, the friction is real, and they are normal, they are expected, they are part of being a system that moves, that changes, that transitions from one state to another. We are approaching a kind of integration now, a coming together of the pieces that have been laid out slowly, carefully across this time we have spent here. Starting is not a single event. It is not a moment of pure will, a flash of motivation, a decision that carries you instantly from stillness to engagement. It is more layered than that, more intricate, more textured. It is a negotiation between systems, between effort discounting and reward prediction, between executive reconfiguration and emotional amplification, between abstract hierarchies and concrete actions, between embodied cost pricing and cognitive load, between deliberation and delegation, awareness and preparation, planning and execution. Each of these systems has its own logic, its own priorities, its own way of contributing to or resisting the transition. And they do not always agree. Sometimes they pull in different directions. Sometimes they amplify each other. Sometimes they cancel each other out. The threshold exists because these systems must come into alignment, because your mind must shift from one configuration to another, because your body must price the movement and allocate the energy, because your emotions must be faced or bypassed or integrated, because the abstract must become concrete, the general must become specific, the future must become now. And all of this takes something from you. Not always much, but never nothing. There is always a cost to crossing the boundary, always friction at the transition point. But here is what is also true. The threshold is not the task. The resistance you feel before starting is not the same as the resistance you will feel while doing. Often, it is much greater. Often, it misrepresents what lies ahead. The liminal state is a poor predictor. It shows you a distorted version, an inflated version, a version weighted toward caution and cost. It is trying to protect you, in a sense, trying to ensure you do not overcommit, do not expend resources you cannot afford to lose. But its estimates are conservative, its calculations are cautious. And so what you feel at the threshold is real, but it is not complete. It is not the whole truth. The truth emerges only after you have crossed over, only after you have started, only after the transition has resolved and you are inside the task itself. Sometimes the task is as hard as the threshold suggested. Sometimes it is harder. But often, more often than you might expect, it is easier. The weight lifts, the anxiety fades, the boredom transforms into something closer to engagement, or at least something more neutral, more bearable. Mood follows action more reliably than it precedes it. Energy becomes available after movement begins. The threshold lies to you, and you discover the lie only by crossing it. But you do not have to cross it alone. You can build support structures. You can create cues that carry you across. You can break the transition into smaller steps. You can delegate the decision to context, to habit, to implementation intentions. You can recognize the threshold for what it is, a temporary state, a passage, not a destination. And you can be gentle with yourself in the threshold. You can recognize that the resistance is not a moral failing. It is not weakness or laziness or inadequacy. It is friction. It is structure. It is the cost of transition, built into the machinery of action. Everyone pays this cost. Some people have learned to reduce it, to modulate it, to navigate it more skillfully. But no one eliminates it completely. The threshold is always there, waiting every time you approach a beginning. And that is okay. That is how it is supposed to be. None of this is advice exactly. This is not a prescription. You are not being told what to do, or when to do it, or how to do it better. This is simply a mapping, a description of territory that you already know, territory you have visited many times, perhaps territory you are visiting right now. The threshold exists. The liminal state is real. The friction of starting is not imaginary, not weakness, not failure. It is structure. It is process. It is the cost of transition, the weight of reconfiguration, the gap between states. And you can meet it as it is, not as something to be overcome through force, not as something to be ashamed of, not as something that should not exist. It exists because you are a system that changes states, that moves from rest to action, from one task to another, from one configuration to the next. And every change has friction. Every transition has cost. This is not unique to you. This is not a problem to be solved. This is simply how the machinery works. You might notice the threshold more clearly now when it arrives. You might recognize the feeling, the weight, the resistance. You might see it not as a wall, but as a doorway, not as an ending, but as a passage. And you might notice that the doorway is narrower than it feels, that the passage is shorter than it seems, that the other side is closer than the threshold would have you believe. Or you might not notice any of this. You might remain in the moment you are in, however that moment feels. And that, too, is acceptable. That, too, is where you are allowed to be. There is no urgency here, no pressure, no demand that you move, that you start, that you cross over. The threshold will be there when you are ready for it, or it will pass, or it will return later. Thresholds do not disappear. They recur. They are part of the rhythm of action. What matters more, perhaps, is that you are less alone in this space now, that the threshold has been named, has been seen, has been recognized as real, that what you feel in the moment before starting is not a reflection of your worth, your strength, your character. It is simply the threshold, the liminal state, the gap between states, the friction of transition, and it will pass. It always passes, either through action or through time or through release. But it will not hold you forever. You are here now, in this moment, and this moment is enough. You do not need to be anywhere else. You do not need to be doing anything else. You can simply be here, breathing, listening, letting these words settle into the spaces between your thoughts. The threshold will come again. It always does. Every day brings thresholds. Every task, every decision, every movement from one state to another. You will face it again tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. But right now, it is not here. Right now, there is only this. Only the quiet. Only the stillness. Only the gentle recognition that you are exactly where you need to be. Perhaps you have been holding tension in your body. Perhaps your shoulders have been raised, your jaw clenched, your breath shallow. You might notice this now. You might allow yourself to soften slightly, to release the holding, to let the tension dissipate just a little. There is nothing to defend against in this moment, nothing to prepare for, nothing to brace against. You can rest. You can be still. You can allow yourself to simply exist, without purpose, without goal, without the need to be moving toward anything. This rest is not the same as the liminal state. This is not the threshold. This is not the space of conflict between rest and action. This is simply rest itself. Pure rest. Rest without the shadow of obligation hanging over it. Rest that does not need to justify itself. You are allowed this. You have always been allowed this. And when the threshold returns, as it will, you will meet it from this place of rest, from this place of having allowed yourself to soften, to breathe, to be. The threshold does not need to be conquered. It does not need to be feared. It does not need to be avoided or forced through or wrestled with. It simply needs to be recognized, seen, acknowledged. And then, when you are ready, when the moment arrives, you will step forward, or you will not. Either way, you are still here, still whole, still exactly as you need to be. There is a gentleness available to you, even at the threshold, even in that moment of resistance, of friction, of heaviness. You can meet the threshold with curiosity instead of judgment. You can notice what it feels like, how it manifests in your body, what thoughts arise, what emotions surface. You can observe without needing to change anything, without needing to fix anything, without needing to be different than you are. The threshold is information. It tells you something about your state, your capacity, your relationship to the task ahead. Sometimes it tells you that you are tired, that you need rest before you can engage. Sometimes it tells you that the task is more abstract than it needs to be, that you need to translate it into concrete steps. Sometimes it tells you nothing at all. It is simply there, a structural feature of transition, neutral and inevitable. Learning to read the threshold takes time, takes practice, takes a willingness to pay attention, to notice patterns, to see what is actually present rather than what you think should be present. Sometimes the threshold is telling you to wait. Sometimes it is telling you to rest. Sometimes it is telling you that your approach needs adjustment. And sometimes it is telling you nothing, and the right response is simply to step forward anyway, to cross it despite the resistance, to trust that the other side will be more manageable than it appears from here. There is wisdom in the threshold if you listen, but there is also distortion. The skill is learning which is which, learning when the resistance is meaningful information, and when it is simply noise, simply the structural cost of transition that you must pay regardless. This learning happens slowly, over years, not days. You will cross thousands of thresholds in your life. Some will be easy, some will be hard, some will surprise you, some will teach you. All of them will be temporary. And so we return once more to the place where we began. There is a moment that lives between rest and action. It has no fixed length. Sometimes it lasts a second. Sometimes it stretches across minutes or longer still. This is the moment we might call the threshold. It is the space before you begin. You have been in this space before. You will be in this space again. It is as familiar to you as your own breathing, even if you have never named it, never examined it, never sat with it this long. And now, having sat with it, having explored it, having recognized it for what it is, perhaps it will feel slightly different the next time you encounter it. Perhaps there will be less judgment, less self-criticism, less sense that you are doing something wrong simply by hesitating. Perhaps you will recognize it as the threshold, as the liminal state, as the temporary passage between one state and another, as something that will pass, that must pass, that always passes, or perhaps nothing will change. Perhaps the threshold will feel exactly as it always has, and that, too, is fine. Understanding does not always change experience. Sometimes it simply allows you to hold the experience differently, to relate to it differently, to be less consumed by it. Either way, you are not lost. You are not failing. You are simply navigating the territory as best you can with the resources you have in the moment you are in. And that has always been enough. That will always be enough. Rest now if you need to rest. Or begin if you are ready to begin. Or remain here in this space for as long as you need. There is no right answer. There is no correct way to be. There is only this moment, and you in it, exactly as you are. The threshold will come. The threshold will pass. The threshold will return. This is the rhythm of action, the pulse of engagement, the architecture of how you move through the world. And you do not have to move perfectly. You do not have to start easily or quickly or without friction. You do not have to eliminate the threshold or conquer it or transcend it. You simply have to recognize it, to see it, to know that it is there and that it is temporary, and that you have crossed it before and you will cross it again. That is all. That has always been all. The words are quieter now, softer, slowing, and soon they will stop altogether, and you will be left with the silence, with your own thoughts, with the rhythm of your own breathing. And in that silence, you might notice that you feel slightly different than you did when we began. Perhaps calmer, perhaps more settled, perhaps more at ease with whatever moment you are in, whatever threshold you are approaching or avoiding or holding. Or perhaps you feel the same. Perhaps nothing has shifted. And that is okay too. That is more than okay. You have been here. You have listened. You have allowed yourself this time, this space, this gentle exploration of the moment before beginning. And that itself is enough. Just this. Just here. Just now. Let the weight settle. Let the thoughts slow. Let the breathing deepen. There is nowhere else to be. Nothing else to do. No threshold to cross unless you choose to cross it. No pressure to move unless you choose to move. Just this quiet moment. Just this gentle space. Just you. Here. Now. Exactly as you are. Exactly as you need to be. And when you are ready, when the time comes, you will know. You will feel the shift. Or you will not feel it, but you will move anyway. Or you will remain here a while longer. Whatever happens will be right. Because you are here. Because you are listening. Because you are allowing yourself this moment of settling, of softness, of permission to simply be. And that is the foundation. That is the ground beneath everything else. That is what makes starting possible, when starting is what you choose. Or what makes resting possible, when resting is what you need. The threshold will always be there, but so will you. So will this quiet. So will this breath. So will this moment of being exactly where you are, exactly as you are, without needing to be anywhere else. Rest in that. Rest in this. Rest. Be. Here. Now. This is enough. Breathe. You are enough. Always.